Well, hey, Happy New Year, church. Welcome to a brand new year. I can't be more excited about what all God is going to do in this coming year, and I'm just pumped. I'm excited for what God has planned for this year, for you, for me, for our church, for all that God is doing, and I think God's going to do some incredible things. I was reading a little bit about New Year's. The first recorded celebration of a new year was by the Babylonians. They celebrated what they called a festival to, I believe the word is Akidu. It's a Sumerian word for barley. And they had a different ritual each day for 11 days. They celebrated this god defeating a evil sea goddess, and they also appointed new leaders during that time. Romans later on celebrated the new year on March 1st, and they celebrated this with parties. And then Julius Caesar changed that calendar and began the celebration on January 1st, like we celebrate today. America used to celebrate New Year's Day in New York City with bells ringing. That was kind of what America always did. All the churches would ring their bells together. And one time America celebrated it in New York City. The city of New York put on a fireworks show, and this was back in the early 1900s, and everyone was so excited until the ashes from the fireworks came down and began to burn the city. And many houses began to burn to the ground. And so they kind of put a stop to fireworks for a long time. So instead, they switched to what we see now happen at New York City. We watch the giant ball drop in New York City. We celebrate it, by perhaps watching college football and eating really good food. But the people in other countries used to celebrate by hanging onions on their door so the evil spirits would smell the bad smell and flee away, and so it'd be a good new year, and that would kind of chase out the bad spirits in their houses. They would smell that onion and say, I don't want anything to do with that. Maybe this is what some guys try to do on New Year's Eve, like they try to chase away the bad spirits by eating food that makes them smell kind of bad, right? In 1776, Americans would have celebrated by giving out oranges with cloves stuck in them. This was a big gift in the early colonial times. And they also celebrated by drinking hot chocolate. So one thing that all of these things have in common with the way we celebrated in the first day of 2022 is that all of them are in the past. We don't live in the Babylonian time and day. We don't live in the Roman time and day. We don't live in the early 1900s when they shot fireworks off in New York City. And we don't live in 2022 anymore. It's a brand new year. It's a brand new day. And Jesus actually had some advice that I think will help us as we begin to look towards what God is going to do today, and we begin to turn away from what has happened in the past. John chapter 21, verse 3, Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we'll go with you. They went out, they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So interesting. So the disciples are going to go fishing, and this is not like you and I going fishing. We go fishing by going to Cabela's, buying a rod and reel, and going fishing. What the Bible is saying here is they're leaving the life of following Jesus and being his disciples, and instead they're going back to their old life. They're turning to their past and saying, hey, this isn't working. We're going to go back to what we used to do. And it's very interesting to me that they didn't recognize Jesus. Now, they fished all night and they caught nothing, but they see Jesus on the shore and they don't recognize him. I think that often in our lives, when we become stuck in the past, when we become determined to live in the past, we don't see Jesus at work today. When past bitterness, past pain, past hurts, past success is everything about us. When we say things like, well, back in the good old days, or this is how it used to be, I find myself saying that more and more. But what I realize is the more I look to the past, the less I see of Jesus at work today. So Jesus said to them in verse 5 of chapter 21, of John 21, "Children, do you have any fish?" And they answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." So they cast it. Now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. Isn't that like Jesus? That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came into the boat dragging the net full of fish. They were not far from land, about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard, hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. Man, I love fishing. I've had some fun days fishing. I've never caught 153 fish in one day. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." And now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. I love that they recognize Jesus by the way he cares for them. This is how they realize it's him. He feeds them. He blesses them. He helps them. He cares for them. And this is how we see Jesus at work in our lives today, is we look for the signs and the evidence that he cares for us. And one thing that I think that he said was so important, it was such good advice. Cast your net on the right side. Some of the older passages, some of the older versions of the Bible say, cast your net on the other side. And I think it's time for some of us to cast our net on the other side of 2022. It's time to step into 2023. It's time to say, hey, we're thankful for the past. We can learn from it. We can be grateful for it. But it's time to step into today. It's time to get to the other side of the boat. It's time to live where God has us living. Man, I recognize that the old days were great, but we don't live there. These are the good old days. These are the days that God has for us, and they're the days that he's filled with so many blessings. So it's time to cast our hurt to the other side. It's time to cast our pain to the other side, our bitterness, our burdens, our past, our mistakes, our failures. And it's time to cast the way we used to do things to the other side. You know what it's time to do? It's time to step into the day that the Lord has given us. God has wonderful things planned for you in 2023. How do I know this? I'm not a prophet. I'm not asking you to give me money, all those things. What I'm saying to you is I know that God has wonderful things for you because the Bible says his mercies are new every morning. You woke up in a brand new day. You woke up in a brand new year. You woke up in the day that the Lord gave you. He prepared it specifically for you. And it's got its brand new, fresh set of mercies just for you. The Bible says, this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice. We will be glad in it. When you witness, just like Jesus did, how good God is, you realize that the day he's made for you is special. I think the secret to life is living in the day that God's given you. Because when you do, you realize how special that day is. When you're not consumed with past bitterness, when you're not consumed with past fears, past pain, they're real. All of those things are real. But when you embrace the day that God has prepared specifically for you, you realize how amazing that day is. You recognize how beautiful a sunrise is when you realize that God gave it to you as a gift. You recognize these things. You realize how incredible time is with those that you love. And I find that I'm so much more productive when I realize that each and every new day is a blessing from God. I become so much more productive. And I become so much more grateful. I want to challenge you this year, hey, step into the other side. Cast your net on the other side. It's time to enter the day that the Lord has made. It's time to step into 2023. It's time to step into his presence. It's time to step into the day with him. He's here. And I feel like sometimes God is in the present moment and we're still way back in the past. Yeah, but did you hear what they said about me 7 years ago? God's like, yeah, but I got something good for you today. Yeah, but do you know what happened 4 years ago? Yeah, but I got something good for you today. Yeah, but did you see how I messed up back there? Yeah, but I got something good for you today. His mercies are new every day. He provides for them. He cares for them. And when they realize who He is, and when they realize how amazing He is, and when they realize how well He cares for them, everything about the disciples begins to change. And this is how it is for us. So I want to encourage you, hey, step into the new year. It's a brand new year. God's got new mercies for you. God's got a bright future for you. Old things are passed away. All things are become new. And it's time to embrace that and step forward with Him. You know, someone told me one time, you never advance by standing still. You never advance by stepping backwards or going to the side. The only way to advance is by stepping forward, and then stepping forward, and then stepping forward, and then stepping forward. And what they were talking to me about is how sometimes I can allow fear to make me hold still and just say, well, I don't know if I can do that. Don't let this year be the year where you stay stationary. Instead, let this be the year where you step into all that God has planned for you. I love you, church. Always remember, you matter.